An issue. All right, I think that we're live. My name is Charlie Minato.
And I'm Brooks Whittington.
And we are from halfwheel.com. This is the first of 4 shows that we have planned for you as part of our lead-in for the PCA convention and trade show, which takes place next month, and we'll get to the exact details shortly. Each one of these shows has a different theme. This is sort of the intro one, so we are going to talk about what is the PCA convention and trade show, why it's important, as well as the changes, because there have been many changes that have happened, not just with the trade show, but also the outside world since the last one took place 2 years ago. But before we get that started, we have some things we need to put up on the screen. And anyway, we'll be back here. Well, Brooks won't be back here next week. He's taking a little vacation. But Patrick and I will be back here next week. But we'll be doing 4 of these shows. This is the first one every Friday, same time, same place, Half Wheels Facebook and YouTube pages each week. And we also have a contest. So Brooks, do you want to grab the prize from over there?
Yes.
So, okay, let's see if I can get this right here. So we have, oh no, so I forgot I can't
hit you in the head with that thing.
No, I forgot the, let's see if I can get this right.
Just hold this up for.
All right, so we have an issue where we can't play audio while that thing's going. Anyway, we have 3 of these longboards, or Drew State's got 3 of these per show to give away. The way this is going to work is you're going to ask a question on Facebook or YouTube. You can see there's some terms and conditions. You got to be in the U.S. You got to be at least 21 years of age or older. And you ask a question, presumably related to the PCA convention and trade show. Brooks will pick them at the end of each show. We will answer them, and the 3 questions that we pick, the people that ask them will win one of the skateboards. Drew State does this sort of every year over the summer, where they have their Subculture Studios, which is in Nicaragua, attached to the factory that they've got there. And what they do is they paint these custom items. So they've done shoes, they've done chevettas, they've done tobacco molds, they've done tobacco leaves, they've done all sorts of things. Last year they did longboards, and apparently they have a whole mess of them left to give away. And so it may not be Her Esteli branded like that. They could be Liga Privada, it could be Acid, it could be Subculture, it could be General Drew State, it could be a lot of different things. But we'll be giving away 3 of those per show. And from what I can tell, they don't come with, if you're like actually interested in riding them, they do not come with the trunks and wheels. You're just getting the deck. I think those are the right skateboard lingos. Brooks, do you know any skateboard lingo?
Yes, the deck is absolutely correct. Yeah, it's just the deck and nothing else. No, no wheels or tires or whatever.
All right. So that's the contest. And before we get started, Brooks, you got something you want to talk about?
Right. So perhaps the most important thing. What are we smoking today, Charlie? What do you got?
We'll see if I can get this on camera. I've got an Arturo Fuente. Oh, look at that. It's going to zoom. 858 sun-grown, I believe, sun-grown Rosado.
Nice. Got a box of those somewhere. And I am smoking a Illusione Hot 10 Churchill.
It kind of got in focus.
Close enough.
All right. So with that said, we're going to get started. Probably look at the comments to make sure that, like, oh, look at that. Everything's working great. All right. Oh, we just did that. Look at that. All right. So this is going to be sort of divided into 2 halves. The first part is going to be what is PCA 2021. And with that said, Brooks, when does this thing take place?
Well, this year, the show is taking place from July 9th through the 14th. It's a 4-day trade show, but the first day,
I think it's the 13th.
It said 14th on the website.
Yeah, I think they screwed that up. I mean, technically, I guess there's like the pack-up continuation of the pack-up day, but you will not be in Vegas on July 14th. I mean, if you'd like to stay to July,
no,
July
we're
14th,
good. We're good.
Okay.
All right. The first day is seminars, all seminars, and then after that, you have the trade show. After that, now it is quite a bit. Close. It's fairly close to July 4th holiday. Not as close as it has been in past years, but it is an interesting idea. The idea that you have these this trade show that's massive and so close to such a major holiday. But that's not the only thing. What happens at the show, Charlie?
Well, I'm trying to turn our AC units off.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, no. So, what happens at the trade show is, as we have details for it. So, there's a lot of things going on. It is a trade show that would be considered a selling trade show. That's not the only thing that happens. And so the basics of it are that manufacturers show up, they have booths, they bring products. Sometimes they bring new items, which we'll get to in a second. And traditionally, they offer retailers discounts that are pretty substantial, which is sort of a carrot to give the retailers to attend the trade show. It's a diverse group in any given year, but it certainly has an American focus to it and a non-Cuban focus. You won't see Habanos SA with a booth at this trade show, and you won't typically see a ton of international retailers. Some of the larger ones and the ones that do more online sales that include a lot of non-Cubans will show up. So you'll see somebody like Mitchell Orchant from Cigars Ltd. You'll see the Bendens from Cigar World in Dusseldorf, but it's not exactly like Intertabac where you get medium and smaller size German and French retailers, and it certainly does not draw a ton of, say, Asian or Middle Eastern retailers, though there usually are a handful of each. So this is a screenshot of a live map, and this is pretty typical of a trade show. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And you can see that there are some familiar names, and there are different size booths. So you see Gurkha's got a really big booth. Rocky Patel, Arturo Fuente, JC Newman down in the right-hand corner have large booths. And so you can also see there's some smaller companies in there. We are at the very, very bottom right-hand corner, but please don't come by our booth. These booths can range from 10 by 10, so 100 square feet, and some of them are north of 4,000 square feet. This is the Rocky Patel booth, which is usually one of the busier booths and also one of the more interesting layouts, because unlike most booths that have sort of a defined wall situation, or at least like you can kind of tell when the booth ends and starts, Rocky does it a little bit different. They put up these displays. You can see there's sort of there's actually, I think, 4 columns of them, or 3 columns, but you can see 2.5 of them here. And inside of those displays, Rocky Patel will usually put one line per display with a heavy emphasis on the new lines. And what you can also see going on in the background, you can actually see Rocky like sort of right to the right of the middle of the screen there, talking with 2 other gentlemen. But you can also see that there are people.
Where's Waldo there?
It is like a little bit of Where's Waldo. Can you find the Drew Estate logos? You can also see that there are people sitting down. Those typically are retailers, and they hopefully are placing orders if you're Rocky Patel. And then the other thing, and the big reason why people like Half Wheel come to the trade show, is because this is a place where a disproportionate amount of new product is introduced. It's not to say that the majority of new product for the non-Cuban world gets introduced here. It certainly is not that. But in sort of its best years, you'll see probably 30 to 35% of the new product will get introduced in this 4-day trade show stretch. And that is a picture of what was a new size for the Cas Fernandez Anniversario line at the 2019 trade show.
That's a great picture for you.
Yeah, and this is out of order. I think that's what the thing I was trying to figure out. Why do we need to... Oh, no, this is actually in order. I think you're supposed to ask this question, though.
I think according to this, you have a question.
Oh, are we attending the trade show?
Yes, Half Wheel is attending the trade show.
All right,
last year, yeah, thanks. All right, we're done. Last year, we did not attend the trade show. We made a decision before it was actually canceled to not attend due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic and safety issues therein. However, this year we are fully vaccinated, and we are good to go. So yeah, we'll be there. There'll be 5 of us there working the trade show, and be fun times.
I mean, I don't actually know if we're all fully. You and I are fully vaccinated, but I actually haven't asked the rest of our staff.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Fair point.
I think Brian said he's fully vaccinated, and I know Patrick got a shot. I don't know if he got the second one. Anyway, and then I have no clue about Heather's replacement. So Brooks,
does he have a name?
He does. Kyle.
Okay. So yes. So. Other than that, the fact that we're going, why exactly does a trade show happen is a question that a lot of people have, and I think you are uniquely suited to discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's there are trade shows, there are countless trade shows in all sorts of industries. selling trade shows are sort of, I think, from what I understand, losing their luster. It is very expensive to have these trade shows, and having the idea of having people physically there to place orders isn't necessarily, and certainly after 2020, it's becoming less and less essential. However, this trade show is a bit different because it is hosted by a trade organization. So it's hosted by the PCA, and the money that is generated from the trade show, which is the bulk of the PCA's revenue, and I would imagine the bulk of their profits as well, is used to fund legislative efforts as well as other sort of trade organization aspects. The most notable use of this money is to fund part of the lawsuit, the joint lawsuit against the FDA regarding cigar regulations. So there is sort of a charitable endgame to the trade show, even if the sort of day-to-day business there is very sort of commercial and capitalistic. All right. We've just completely killed that segment, I guess.
Done.
Yeah, so this is not going to be a balanced one in terms of we're going to spend a lot more time on the sort of second part of this. Once again, if you are in the US and are on Facebook or YouTube, I know we have some questions. I haven't actually looked at them yet, but ask a question and potentially win a custom painted longboard deck from Juristate and Subculture Studios. We will get to those questions probably in about a half hour or so. So the next part that we are going to talk about are the changes, and there are many, and some of them are positive and some of them aren't positive. And some of them are things that are sort of the actions or directly related actions from the Premium Cigar Association. And some of them, as you might expect, are things that are very much out of their hands. And I think it's important to note here, this is Half Wheel. We're going to call it like we see it. We're not going to hold any punches, but we're also not going to try to take any cheap shots at the PCA. I certainly have made my thoughts about what I believe to be some poor decision-making on their behalf, to put it mildly, over the years, very public. And some of those things are going to get rehashed here. But, like, we're going to the trade show. We're spending a lot of money to go to the trade show. It's still, at least at the time being, seems like it is an essential part of sort of what Half Wheel does. But that could be changing, and I think that's a major theme for the changes. But we're going to start with the really practical ones first, which is this thing's had a lot of different names over the years, but every time that we've been to it, Brooks, it's been called IPCPR.
Correct. So it used to be called the International Premium Cigar and Pipe Retailers Association, although it's shortened to IPCPR typically. But they changed that to PCA, which is the Premium Cigar Association. Much easier to get through your mouth. In terms of changes, it comes with a host of changes of, business cards and websites, things like that. But in terms of actual functional changes, I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference. Do you?
We haven't.
Doesn't really roll off. It rolls off the tongue a lot better than
IPCPR. No, you were at that press conference, but you were trying to take photographs. They announced a lot of. Yeah, they announced a lot of things about that they were going to try to do. So they launched the magazine, which has shown up. I don't know what actual impact that's had. They said they were going to do more events. So that included both. I forget if it was the Congressional Black Caucus, but that may have been mentioned. I know they wanted to host something. If it wasn't the CBC, a group similar to the CBC. At the townhouse, their headquarters in Washington, D.C. They also announced they were going to do more events of their own. So they did a consumer sort of oriented event in D.C. They also did a training here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And I want to say they had another one. Obviously, those were all things that were announced in the summer of 2019. And then some shit happened in early 2020. So
something.
I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what the roadmap would have looked like without COVID in terms of those other changes, but they certainly announced some other things that they were trying to do beyond just simply a rebranding aspect. I'm not sure we've necessarily seen that much of an impact, and in order to even notice any impact, you work in the cigar industry full time, and I would say are fairly knowledgeable, despite the internal jokes that we make about it.
Fairly,
I would imagine more knowledgeable than what's going on than most retailers in the country. But like, you don't notice any difference. I'm super into the weeds and can barely point out like some very specific examples. So I would say that overall, not much has changed functionally speaking in terms of their newfound mission.
Right. But while that may not have had a huge impact, something that did have a huge impact was the number of the number of companies that were going. So I heard some companies pulled out.
Yeah.
That sounded really fake, though.
It did. Yeah. It's great. Do you want to try again? We got time.
Okay. All right. I got nothing.
All right. So
did somebody pull out or what?
Yeah.
That could be for any number of websites.
Yikes. So here's the deal. I think that it's very important when we're having these conversations about the 2021 trade show to understand that the 2020 trade show was going to be a shit show. And that was before COVID started. In January of last year, Drew Estate, Altatis USA, General Cigar Company, and Davidoff of Geneva USA, which I completely did in the just asinine order there, 4 of the largest companies in the cigar industry, and not like 4 of the 10 largest cigar companies, but 4 of the 5 largest cigar companies, and depending on how you want to look at it, probably the 4 largest. And like, there is a substantial difference between the 4th largest cigar company and the 7th largest cigar company. And so these are the 4 of the 5 sort of major cigar companies announced that they were not going to be attending or exhibiting at the 2020 PCA convention and trade show. That was due to a number of reasons. And without going too far into detail, because I think I've written thousands and thousands of words about that, the short of it was sort of 2 different problems. One of them was that the trade show itself was becoming less and less profitable for these companies. They never sort of said it was unprofitable. They just said that it was decreasing in profitability. And these companies, a lot of them were spending $1 million plus to attend the trade show in any given year individually. And what that meant is that as the profitability was declining, the cost of the trade show wasn't really declining. And at some point, I think some of these companies felt like, maybe this year it's fine, maybe next year it's still profitable, but at some point there's going to be a time when it no longer becomes profitable and we've just outlaid a ton of cash. And so I think the risk assessment there was becoming a bit more challenging. The other issue was that they have a lot of grievances with the PCA's leadership and decision making, not just with the trade show, but also with sort of the broader mission of the organization and really with the decision making and how decisions are made. And namely that the executive committee, which is the super powerful ultimate sort of say about what happens with anything regarding this organization, is made up of 5 retailers and the executive director. So there's no manufacturer input, and these manufacturers contribute disproportionately. Just in terms of square footage, they were a little less than 19% of the 2019 trade show. Now, I don't know what their contributions was in terms of the amount of money. I would suspect it was something similar than that. But they felt like, for the amount of money that they were spending, the fact that they basically had 0 representation when push came to shove was an issue. I will point out that the PCA never, certainly to us, they never have answered any of the questions regarding what took place on the record. There were meetings that were had between these big companies. It wasn't like it came completely out of the blue between the big companies and the PCA, and the big companies claimed the PCA did not really do anything in terms of addressing their concerns and complaints. And once again, just in the interest of complete fairness here, I wasn't in those meetings, and we have not heard the PCA side of the story, at least not to us. I know they've given some other interviews, and I haven't watched all of them to know exactly how much detail they've gone into, but it doesn't really seem to be much of an explanation floating around publicly about what the PCA's side of the story is there. So the PCA's response in 2020, as inevitably my cigar goes out here, in January 2020 was like, they acknowledged at the very least that this had happened. And that was kind of it. I mean, they certainly tried to get the CRA board member companies to sort of issue public statements in support, and you saw a lot of them doing it, whether that was Arturo Fuente or Taiwahe, or any number of other CRA board members. But it didn't seem like there was this drastic shift that you would expect when 4 of your largest companies tell you that they no longer believe in your business. And I think that if COVID had not happened, I'm very, very confident that 2020 would have been a disaster, because there just aren't enough companies to replace the amount of booth space that was being given up by these companies, which means that that's a loss of revenue for the PCA, and probably fewer retailers showing up, which only spirals out of control. And we're seeing some of the effects of that here. This is a list from companies that we have contacted, with the exception of Ahio, I guess, because they're not in business anymore, that were exhibiting at the 2019 trade show, that are cigar related companies that have told us that they will not be at the 2021 trade show. So you can see the big ones: Altadas, Davidoff, Drew Estate General. You can also see what is, generally speaking, a list of smaller companies. Hoyt and Nicaragua was sort of a weird one there because they're distributed by Drew Estate. But outside of that, I would say the rest of them would be, at the very generous, would be medium-sized companies. Certainly some notable names there: Romacraft, Viaje, and Southern Draw, I would say, is also, particularly for this trade show, is a very important or not, maybe not very important, but is an outsized importance compared to maybe what their national footprint is. Their booth is typically pretty busy every time that I stop by it at these trade shows. So you can see that's 25 or 26 names. 26 names. It's a lot of companies on there. I need to stop talking and see if the cigar stole it.
I don't think it is.
Look at that.
Yeah. Dead space on the ticket.
You don't have anything to fucking say about these companies?
I think I'm surprised that Romacraft isn't showing up. I mean, I guess with their party, they decided that was more important. And I'm not looking forward to not having a party. It's unfortunate. I enjoy their party every year.
You just said, I mean, in addition to the things that I'm going to have to correct so that way we don't get angry emails, but you just said, I'm looking forward to not having a party. I don't think that that's why Romacraft decided they weren't going. I think there's Patrick and I are going to be back next week. We are going to do a show largely about these companies and sort of their impacts of not being there. But to make it very brief, Romacraft is a company that consistently tells people that they basically, everything that they ship to the U.S. Leaves their warehouse pretty quickly. They don't have a ton of standing inventory. If that's the case, then if you don't have a ton of excess inventory, you don't need to go to a trade show. It's just an added expense of, at the very least, just traveling out there and hotels and meals. But then you start having to build a booth and you start giving discounts and the rest of what's expected at the trade show. And it's like, well, if we only had 80 boxes to sell anyway, probably don't need to spend all this money to go to a trade show. And Romacraft did decide that they could probably do a better party in Austin, which they did last weekend, and was very nice.
Which I heard was very, very good. You were there. Was it really nice?
It was very nice. It was extremely well done. I don't really know how to describe what took place. It was not a cigar event in any traditional terms. But it was, you've been to Romacraft events before. They don't screw around.
I saw the pictures. They look nice.
The photographer looks like he knew what he was doing.
That's always good.
Yep. All right. So those are the companies that are not exhibiting. In the interest of fairness, there are, as of, I want to say Monday, but it may have been over the weekend. We looked at the live list that's on the PCA's website. There were 109 companies listed. They sent out an email earlier this week that suggested there was around 130 companies exhibiting. I don't honestly know what the exact number is. There's a lot of reasons as to why that's murky because of how they sort of process booths. But to give you an idea, we covered not exhibitors, but we at the last trade show covered 150 companies. Now, sometimes, like in the case of Drew Estate and Hoyt and Nicaragua are in one booth. And so that would be one exhibitor, but two companies. I think it's very safe to say that there will be a substantially fewer number of exhibitors and companies at the 2021 show than there was in 2019. But I don't think we'll get really a full accounting of that until the trade show opens and we get sort of a finalized idea of who was there and who wasn't there. All right. Man, these questions maybe weren't in the best of order.
I think you've already covered that.
For the most part.
Probably just move on then.
I think it's worth pointing out here that the 2020 trade show was canceled. It took a lot longer than I would have liked for it to get canceled. The PCA, was putting out statements that it was going to happen, and we asked them, and they told us, they responded to those emails and said it was still happening. And then, at a certain point, it became very apparent that it was not going to be able to happen because of the local laws in Nevada that would have prevented it from happening. I don't know if this is the first trade show back at the Sands Expo Center, but it very well might be. It's certainly, unless they had one last week or the week before, I suspect that this is the first one on the calendar that we can see. But there may have been a smaller one earlier. And so the PCA didn't really have a choice. They could not have done the trade show in 2020, at least not in the state of Nevada, or at a. I don't know if they could have done it in the state of Nevada. They certainly could not have done it at a casino in Nevada. All right, so with that question completely out of order, are consumers going to be allowed to attend this year, Brooks?
Yeah, no. The answer is no to that. The 2019, they were talking about having Cigar Con, and
look at the camera.
I was looking at you.
Yeah, but that's really awkward if you're watching this at home.
They were talking about having a Cigar Con, which is basically a day where consumers would be allowed to come in and talk to manufacturers and take cigars or whatever, and that was never really materialized. Consumers
was it a popular idea?
What
was it a popular idea?
I'm sorry, you being facetious?
No, I mean, like,
is that a real question?
Here's the deal: if you weren't at the 2019 trade show, you have no idea as to why this. Like, I think you should explain what was proposed and what was the reaction. And
let's just say it was a very controversial idea.
I don't think that's being fair here. I think you should explain. I
think some people would think it was a popular idea, and some people wouldn't.
You are just not being helpful here.
I don't think it was a very popular idea. I think most people who heard about it were against it for various reasons. And I think that probably is one of the reasons that it never came to pass. But regardless of that, the consumers are not allowed on the trade show floor. There will be some that get onto the trade show floor based on the number of retailer passes that are given out. And that happens probably every year that I've been there, at least. I know that this happened. But in terms of an official, let's have consumers go onto the floor and talk to manufacturers and that kind of thing, that's not going to happen according to what we know at this moment.
Yeah, and there's no way for consumers to register to attend the trade show. In order to attend, you need to be a member of the Premium Cigar Association, which means you need to be a business that's somehow cigar related. How hard is it to get into the PCA convention and trade show as a consumer? It's not that challenging. It certainly is not challenging at all if you know somebody, but you cannot just show up and be like, hey, I'm here for the baseball game and expect to be able to walk in. All right. So we've sort of alluded to it, but, there's, I think, a lot to unpack here. So, Brooks, you were at Tobacco Plus Expo last month, which was the first trade show back at the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is not in Las Vegas. It is in Las Vegas, but it's not where the PCA is being hosted. That was the first trade show back post-COVID. And what was that like from like a health and safety, mask wearing, social distancing perspective, being at a cigar trade show where you had to be wearing a mask? Yeah.
So, it was obviously very surreal walking around and seeing people again and that kind of thing. In terms of the safety issues, they had rules just like PCA. PCA has their safety protocols on their website. You can go look at it. It's right here. You can go look at it and see it. And they're basically the same thing. People are going to get checked as they come in, temperature checks, things of that nature. TPE didn't have temperature checks as far as I saw, although it did get there ahead of time. So perhaps, every day. So perhaps it was there for the other people. But the idea is that you're supposed to have masks on when you're walking around, when you're, basically anytime that you are not smoking or eating or drinking, you're supposed to have a mask on. And that all sounds good in theory, but it's extremely difficult to enforce. TPE had women in very skimpy outfits walking around trying to enforce it.
They weren't skimpy. They were.
Well, there was a lot of them there that you didn't see, and I can assure you they were pretty skimpy. Yeah,
the ones that showed up on our Instagram account, I think you should use this correctly. They were very sexualized outfits, but most of their body was covered in clothing, which would be not skimpy.
And you're making that assumption based on what I put on the Instagram account.
I mean, do you have pictures of skimpily
no, because I'm not a creep,
women?
So I don't take pictures of women just randomly.
Well, you did take the ones that showed up on our Instagram.
That was for the website, dude.
It's for the gram. I'm just pointing out that those women were. It was a lot of leather, but there was not
some whips too.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of skin. In fairness, we got to kill some time marks.
That's point noted. Regardless of that, they were walking around trying to enforce it, and it went about as well as you could imagine.
But they had whips.
Probably happy. I didn't see her use it, thankfully. Probably half of the people that I saw were not wearing masks at any given time. And it's a very awkward situation for people to walk around and say, you have to put your mask on, that kind of thing. Interestingly, on the last day, the new CDC guidelines came out saying that fully vaccinated people didn't have to have as many restrictions when it came to wearing masks. And that pretty much opened the doors for a lot of things. Some of the hotels immediately dropped their mask mandates that people were staying at, that smoked cigars people were staying at. And it became even more difficult to enforce that for people. I think it's going to be very difficult for the PCA to do anything like that because of the new CDC guidelines. I imagine there will be people walking around. We'll see, I guess, saying you have to wear a mask. But officially, they say that you have to wear a mask anytime that you are not in a booth smoking, eating, or drinking.
Yeah, I mean, unless the Venetian, which is the host of the event, the physical space, unless they continue to suggest that you need to wear a mask or require wearing a mask, I suspect that we will see an email shortly that's like, hey, good news, you don't need to be wearing your mask. I don't think the PCA wants anything to do with that policy, just from all the headaches that you described. Yep. And I think reasonably speaking at this point, at least in this country, the people that are attending this trade show have had the opportunity to get vaccinated. They've made their choice to do it or not do it. And,
yeah, what's pandemic? Never heard of such a thing.
Jesus Christ. All right. So the other interesting note about, which is related to COVID, I suppose, about TPE is that TPE typically takes place in January or February, but usually in January. And then there's a different cigar trade show of a very different ilk that takes place in March, which is called TAA. And then IPCPR, PCA's got July, and it used to be in August, or it used to rotate between July and August, but has now been in July for quite a while. And so what that means is there's usually this nice separation. You've got a month and a half to 2 months between TPE and TAA, and then TAA takes place in late March, April sometimes. And then you've got sort of 90 days between that and PCA. This year, TAA was a virtual event in March. It's supposed to be, or they're planning on having a in-person event later on in the fall or the winter, I think, actually. And then TPE was in the middle of May, and it was about 60 days before PCA. And that certainly meant on our end, it's really changed how we're having to sort of do our news gathering process. But I also think it's a bit interesting because TPE sort of serves as like a little bit of an appetizer more than it normally does for PCA, and particularly in this COVID world where I think that there were people that went to TPE that were unsure about going to PCA. I actually talked to a retailer this past weekend that said as much, that they were at TPE and they thought it went pretty well, and well enough that they're now wanting to go to PCA. And so I think there could be some positives of that, certainly from a work perspective. It's cramped the schedule down a little bit, and that's not been fun. But I do think that's a bit of a change. There are also some other big picture items, and I'm going to take a few puffs of the cigar because it's inevitably going to go out for this shit show. Anything else you want to fill with this, Brooks?
No, I don't have any filler. I will say, actually, I do have one thing. It was very interesting as I was walking around. I mentioned it in my coverage of TPE. People were just thrilled to be back, and they were thrilled to be in front of people and talking to people and having conversations in person. And it was a very positive feeling when you were walking around, where people were just, happy and happy and happy, even with masks, even with all the other issues that go on. I think that it's going to be a very similar situation at PCA, where there's just so many people who are just, really wanting to do this in person and have these personal conversations, and are going to be very happy about it.
So that's actually a good segue. I don't think you intentionally did that.
No,
but,
I didn't. No, seriously.
There are a lot of other things related to COVID in terms of the trade show beyond just the mask wearing. And Brooks sort of alluded to one of them. So I've made a list of sort of the three big picture pros and cons. I'll start with the pros, and you can see the bottom one there on the left-hand side is the one that Brooks alluded to, which is that I think that the PCA has got some advantages because of COVID that could help them sell this trade show, particularly to retailers, a little bit easier. And one of them is this idea that Brooks just mentioned, which is people want to see each other. There's this desire to get out and travel, whether that's for a work event, which is not really my cup of tea, or whether it's for personal travel, which sounds a lot more appealing these days. And I think that the PCA certainly has leaned into this message before about band together and let's get everyone in Vegas and have a good time. And they've certainly tried to use some of that messaging a little bit more aggressively this year, which I think is helpful. The biggest advantage they've got, though, is that for a number of reasons, 2020 was a very, very good year for most cigar companies, particularly the medium and larger companies. The smaller companies maybe is hit or miss, but without going too in depth about this, because we could do a whole live show just about it. In 2019, it was not a great year. Cigar demand in the US was down. And so towards the end of the year, we started to see layoffs at factories where they were laying off workers. That continued, particularly in Nicaragua in the early part, in Honduras and Nicaragua in the early part of the year. But in Nicaragua, it was going on, and through and sort of up until the end of March, and maybe even a little bit later, actually, now that I think about it. But what ended up happening was that I think everyone, once the impacts of COVID started to hit the US, they weren't really sure what to do. That meant some weird supply things happened. Some of the big retailers, the big internet catalog retailers, started making standing offers to companies saying, hey, we'll buy $1 million of the product if we can get this discount. And a lot of companies took them up on that offer, thinking that the cigar sales were going to slow down and they wanted to have the cash as opposed to having the product. As it turned out, it was the complete opposite. Cigar sales started booming, and you combine the increased demand with also some supply issues. There's the aforementioned issues of workers being laid off. There's the issues that exist with every industry right now with COVID and sort of the impact on workforce, where some of those people are leaving the workforce. Obviously, there's some very tragic consequences, but also there are people that have just decided, it's time for a career change. It's time to, particularly in these countries, maybe it's time, to move to a different place. Maybe it's time to move to a different industry. Some of them are retiring. And then you've got the health and safety aspects of it, which I was never in a factory. I've not been in a factory since we were in Cuba in February of 2020. But, some of these factories were taking these health and safety concerns pretty seriously. In Honduras in particular, the factories were ordered to shut down by the government for many weeks. Factories in Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic shut down sort of quasi-voluntarily for a lot of them did for an extended period of time, but a lot less than in Honduras, where it was getting close to a month. And so that meant that there was less cigars being rolled, or fewer cigars being rolled, and there just hasn't been this ability to catch back up. And so cigar companies are continuing to have scenarios where they're shipping products to Miami or to wherever their warehouses are, and they're heading to retailers pretty quickly thereafter. So that has meant that sales have been great, and the sort of inventory control has been flipped from the problems that were in 2019, where there was too much supply, and now there's too much demand. Furthermore, because events like PCA 2020 didn't happen, and also events at your local cigar shop were almost certainly done virtual for a large chunk of 2020, these companies saved a lot of money on not traveling, not having to necessarily give away as much product, and other sort of expenses that were saved. A lot of these companies took advantage of PPP loans and other things like that, and so they also got some cash that way. If you are asking a cigar company, hey, we'd like you to spend some money right now, most of them, if they're telling you, hey, like, we don't have it, that's a rough sign, because you had to screw up pretty poorly in 2020 to make it not a good year financially. The other thing is that, since that was super long-winded, the PCA's had 18 months to address these concerns, or almost 18 months of not only what the four companies that pulled out were complaining about, but also what the impact of that's going to be, and to try to convince other exhibitors and retailers that the trade show was still going to work and still be viable. Brooks, do you get any sense that that's happened?
No, and it surprised me, and probably you and me as well. It surprised me. I was thinking that they would make some fairly significant changes, or at least announce that they were working on things. It doesn't seem like that they have done that, at least not publicly. I certainly am not as tuned in as you are, but I think that I would have expected them to go a little bit more aggressively on, let's try to do some things now that we have this time and we don't have to worry about a show this year, last year, that is, that they would, try to do something a little bit more, to really take advantage of that time. And I don't think they have, at least not publicly.
Yeah, I don't think there's been there certainly have been some differences in the approaches that they've taken. We'll get to some of them in a second, but I don't think there's been a radical shift. Certainly the basic concept of the trade show remains the same, and I'm not sure that this is really viable until the basic concept of the trade show changes pretty dramatically. That being said, there are some cons, and I think they're probably worse than the positive impacts of the pros are probably outweighed by the negative impacts of the cons. The largest one, which is something I wrote about at the time when the trade show was canceled last year, which is that I think that a lot of the PCA leadership, as well, quite frankly, a lot of the people in the industry, and I think we got off this train a little bit earlier than most, but people have been living under this idea for a very long time that the trade show is an essential piece of the business. And it's an essential thing, particularly as a manufacturer, to attend. And that if you don't attend it as a manufacturer, that typically means you're going out of business. And certainly, we had been told that the 4 companies, there were actually 5 of them at the time, had been, they were making, serious indications that they were considering not attending. Even myself, as late as sort of September, October of last year, kind of didn't necessarily think they'd all go through with it. And I remember telling you in January, before our story broke, that they were in fact going through with it, that they were not going to be attending, and you were very surprised by that. And I think most people were. And I think the world's changing. And last year, everyone got to see what a world without the trade show looked like. Now, obviously, last year was very, very different due to COVID, but it still meant that people got to see the alternate universe where July happened. They didn't go to Las Vegas. They didn't spend all that money. They didn't offer those. I mean, some of them offered the discounts anyway, but they weren't necessarily offering the huge discounts, and business moved right along. And to some degree, that pro of the supply and demand issues that exist right now might be a con, because it would suggest that you maybe don't need to spend all this money to sell product that you already aren't having difficulty selling. Now, there are other reasons to go to the trade show. People like seeing each other. People like catching up. There's other sort of business and strategy that's done at the trade show. But the bulk of the attendees are there either to sell products and have great sales weeks, or to buy products at discounts and to feel like they took advantage of that. And that maybe isn't as much of a concern this year. The other 2 are related, and that's that, we haven't officially gotten a sense of what it's like. We have gotten some indications that the PCA's finances are probably not in as healthy of a place as they were certainly 2 years ago. Some of this is probably due to COVID and not having a trade show last year. Some of this is probably due to 18.5% of your trade show floor getting up and walking in a random week in January. The PCA furloughed. They announced they were going to furlough all of their staff last year. They ended up furloughing most of the staff and kept a couple of people around. And a couple of the people that were furloughed ultimately were let go at the end of that, including one person that deals with the trade show. They have, to my knowledge, not replaced those people with new staffers. We certainly haven't gotten any announcements they have. And so that's a concern, because I would, if of all the criticisms you could make of the PCA, I think overstaffed is not one of them. And certainly overstaffed from a trade show perspective, which once again is something that is, 75, 80% of their revenue directly and indirectly. You kind of want to make sure that your revenue stream is healthy, or is given as much chance to be as healthy as possible. And I'm not sure they've done that. And that is a concern. Obviously, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario there.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
All right, Brooks. So typically we go to this trade show, and the reason why we go, seeing people's nice and whatever, but the reason why we go and the reason why readers come to our site, well, I guess typically it's because there's prizes from Davidoff, but is because there's a ton of new product. Is that going to be the case this year, as far as you can tell?
Right. So you've split up the booths to contact, so that we can contact people and ask about new products, so that we can get some stories up on the site. We do this every year and have for the past number of years. So normally you would email people and you'd get some responses back, and the first email goes out and they'd say, we don't know what's going on. Let's get back together. And we'd have some people who would say, we know this and this and this. And then you send out another round of emails and they say, we've got more stuff now and we have more information. At this point, I've sent out more than 40 emails, and I know you have sent out more. I've gotten back almost nothing, probably 2, maybe 3 different people who have responded. And of those, the only person that I have that is coming out with anything that they can even come close to confirming is Steve Saka, and with Dunbarton. And he hasn't really confirmed it because he doesn't actually know if they're actually going to be there. And it's a very stark contrast to what we've had before, where we had people who have all of these releases that are lined up and ready to go, and they know that they're going to be there in some capacity. Saka may have something there. He may not have anything at all. He may just have, pre-releases for all we know of stuff that comes out later in the year. He could have everything that he's mentioned before, and that's not on him. That's just the nature of what's going on, and not being able to go down to the factory as much as he wants to, and that kind of thing. And it's probably the same with a lot of these companies. But it's just a very unusual situation for us, because normally we have this information, and this time there's just a total lack of information compared to past years, at least on my end. And I think you've probably felt about the same way.
Yeah, it's certainly 45 days out, or fewer than 45 days out. You typically have a lot more announcements being made. I think the short of it is, they're barring some very unexpected and quite frankly irrational changes. There will be a substantially reduced number of new products introduced at this trade show. The 4 companies that aren't attending, just those 4 alone, are responsible for a ton of new products. General Cigar Company is typically 8 to 10 new releases right there. Drew Estate has announced some new things, but they're your Time Suck of the Year award every year at the trade show. The other thing that's happened is that you've got, in addition to the supply and demand issues that I mentioned earlier, you've got issues where you've seen in other industries where there's just global shipping problems and delays and supply issues. And that really has caused issues with the packaging people, which are always a problem this time of year. But I'm not sure, maybe in the lead up to August 2016, when the FDA regulations were about to hit, maybe that was worse, but that was a temporary sort of blip. This has been a sustained issue. I've heard some people telling me that they're getting quoted like, come back to us in 2.5 months and we'll have a discussion about whether or not we'll be able to take on this project, which is just not something that most businesses usually are saying. And the other thing that's going to really reduce the number of new SKUs that I don't think many people focus on, but certainly in Half Wheel it's a big deal for us, is that the accessory companies typically introduced a ton of new products. We've heard from a couple of them that they're not going to be introducing really any new products. And that, I think, is really reliant, really related to issues of factories in China that have a number of issues, and then getting product here is an issue, and all sorts of other problems.
Yeah, for what it's worth, one of the biggest things that I heard just from the moment I stepped into TPE show was people were having problems with packaging. Packaging is the worst that some of them have ever seen. Getting packaging and getting people to be able to manufacture it. And that's, as you said, it's just a major part of these releases. It doesn't matter if you have the cigars, if you can't. I even asked Saka about that. I said, why don't you just put them in bundles if that's the case? I mean, you need to get cigars out. And he says, well, number one, I don't have to get cigars out. And number two, I don't want them in bundles. I want them in boxes because that's how I want them presented. And so if the boxes take longer, then, that's the way it is. So a lot of these people are thinking probably the same kind of thing, is that if you don't need to necessarily, sell these cigars, if you have other cigars that are selling and you're running out of those cigars too, probably, then there's no point in introducing any new product.
All right.
Yes. So along with the new products, however, there could be some exclusive releases. There are some typically every year. And what have you heard about that? There was a live show that PCA put on with some manufacturers where they were mentioning and alluded to exclusive products, but we haven't heard much since then. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah. I mean, so there was this virtual Zoom call, whatever you want to call it, last August, I believe. And this is a screenshot from that. So the PCA announced that these companies were going to have, and a lot of them participated in the trade show or participated in this Zoom call, that these companies were going to have exclusive cigars. Just to run down this list, Padron has not told us anything about what they may or may not be doing, to my knowledge, at least. Rocky Patel, I don't remember if the 60 is slated to be a PCA exclusive, but it may be. I can't remember off the top of my head. Crown Heads has said that their announcement is coming, I believe, in a couple weeks about their exclusive cigar. Fuente has interestingly told me that they will not have a PCA exclusive cigar. They won't have any PCA exclusive cigars. They will have new items, or at least that's the plan. And they will be brick and mortar only, but not PCA exclusive. JC Newman has said that they will not have any new items at PCA, so that, I guess, removes them from having a PCA exclusive. Although Yawa is supposed to be back, I wonder if they're going to say, like, Yawa will only be available at the trade show, but I don't know that if that's going to be the case. Alec Bradley has announced a exclusive size of Magic Toast that will only be available to retailers that place orders at the trade show. Taiwan earlier this week announced that they are going to be discontinuing is not the right word, but they're going to put 2 Vitolas sort of on temporary discontinuation, indefinite discontinuation. The Taiwan Black Label, which is also known as Private Reserve, the Black Label, Britannicus Extra, and Toro. And the last time that you will be able to place orders will either be at the PCA trade show or through the PCA Product Hub, which is a virtual sales platform where the PCA gets a kickback. CLE has not announced anything to me. Has not told me about whether or not they're going to have a PCA exclusive. And Illusione has not given any update about where their PC exclusive might be. I think one thing that's interesting here is that there have been some other ones. Platinum Nova announced a PC exclusive earlier this week. But what I find to be really odd about this is that this is sort of is an idea that I've been a proponent of for a long time. I think it's a really smart move to use this as a carrot to give retailers a reason to show up. You tell them, hey, look, you come to the trade show, there's going to be all these cigars that you can only buy if you're here in person, place the order in person. And, you know, some of these companies probably have the ability to persuade the retailers or nudge them in the right direction. However, we're less than 40 days out, I think, at this point from the trade show. And what is this? We've got 2 companies that have either announced, and Alec Bradley or Crown Heads, or going to announce. Rocky Patel, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then Taiwan, he did that weird discontinuation thing. Like, if you're going to try to use this as a carrot to get retailers to come, this should have been all these products should have been announced 60 days outside the trade show. You got to give retailers enough time to make a decision to travel to the show. I will speak from firsthand experience, and I think I'm uniquely positioned here. Corralling manufacturers and trying to get them to give you information and make product announcements this time of year is really challenging, and it's oftentimes pretty stupid. But this is an idea that sort of has a diminishing return. You make it 90 days out, it's effective at whatever level. 60 days out, it's probably very similarly effective. But you make it 20 days out, and I don't know if it's effective at all. And so this is something where I think if they're going to continue to rely on this, they really need to make sure that they're doing it much further in advance than they've done this year. Right before the 2019 trade show came out, there were a variety of emails that were sent from the PCA. One of them was about the fact that we're not going to allow CBD products onto the trade show floor. This year, they are taking a different approach. Brooks, do you want to
right?
So
yes. So you can see the PCA has a CBD policy on their website, as you can see here. I printed it out. They have allowed CBD, in theory, the CBD products to be on the trade show floor. Their policy states that you can't sample them or in any way, or
you can't consume them.
Right. Thank you. Can't consume them. Right.
On the trade show floor.
On the trade show floor. Yes. However, the problem is that, as Charlie pointed out to me, is that the idea is that they were supposed to get permission and get these things approved ahead of time. And as far as we know, there has been none that have been approved. And so
I don't think that's the best way to describe it, because we don't actually know that. I haven't asked the PCA if they've approved this. I think that
when I said as far as we know, I think that covers that.
Yeah, but I think that could be misleading because we haven't even asked the question. So that would be a bit odd. The issue here is that there are no companies on the list of companies that we saw earlier this week that are listed as exhibitors, which once again may not be the full list of them, that have any indication that they're doing CBD. Or selling CBD products. That's not to say that a company, random cigar company, couldn't decide to do a CBD product or have some CBD products, and they went through the process and got approved. But the indications are that there aren't going to be any CBD specific companies. And in fact, the PCA had earlier in the year had blocked off a small part of the trade show, which they labeled as the CBD pavilion. And it wasn't an actual physical pavilion to my knowledge. It was just a grouping of booths. And the idea was that they were going to put CBD companies in a very specific place so people knew where to go to find them. And also so that they wouldn't have to listen to complaints about, why did you put me next to the people that are selling raspberry gummies? that has been since removed from the map, and that trade show space has sort of been freed up. So it doesn't seem like there's any indication that a CBD specific company is on its way to the trade show. But once again, the way that exhibitor map works, that's not to say that there could be another one. But if the 60 days holds in advance, I think if I was forced to make a prediction, I would say there probably won't be approved CBD products there.
Right, and to be clear, this is very different from TPE. When I went, I had never been to TPE, and it's a shocking trade show in terms of that, because I had been told that it was a lot of CBD and marijuana paraphernalia and things of this nature, vapes. But the cigar section is very, very small compared to the rest of the it's probably less than a third in general. But it's very small compared to the rest of the vape and the marijuana paraphernalia and CBD people. And so it's a huge juxtaposition when you're talking about the difference between a TPE and a CPA PCA trade show in that regard. So I'd be interested to see if there is anybody, as you mentioned, if there's anybody there at all, of just one little lone CBD guy sitting around it's somewhere. We should definitely take a look and make sure we can photograph that. So
yeah, and Jocelyn Cruel, which has a CBD infused cigar called Nugs, is one of those companies that told us that they are not exhibiting at the trade show. So that would be the other sort of CBD tie-in. I forget if we have another slide coming.
This may be a good time to mention that you can ask a question, win a cool prize from Drew Estate. Ask a good question. There have not been a multitude of great questions yet. So
have you looked at any of the questions?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, okay.
I have. One of them is, how do you vaccinate a Roomba? So I think that's a great question.
Well, that person's ineligible to win, because I believe that was Joe Groh, who definitely works for
perhaps not. He's probably got plenty of these things.
I'm sure he does. That's why we have some of them. All right. So you're supposed to ask me if there's any other things.
Oh, yes. Any other things?
And then you're supposed to look for our contest winners.
Right.
So while Brooks picks out the contest winners, there are some other changes. I'm looking at my notes here. The one thing that they've done, which I'm happy to see, is it seems like the seminars that happen, these things typically were completely useless. And they have increasingly become more and more attended, and I think more and more functional. The days of the guy from Massachusetts who owns a chain of pet food stores giving seminars about coupons, which was a very real thing that happened multiple years. Actually,
that actually happened. They actually gave out.
Not only it happened once, it happened. they brought him back. They were like,
was the pet food any good?
No. He was talking about like the concept of coupons. Anyway, it seems like we're going to get some more like sort of more focused to cigars. There's apparently, from what I understand, like a state of the industry type of discussion that's going to take place. And I've also been told that there's going to be a seminar that's going to be more geared towards selling cigars internationally. So it'll be geared towards exhibitors. It'll be curious to see the attendance of these seminars. They are very hit or miss. There have been times when I remember one year we were in an FDA seminar and there was like maybe 15 people in the room and half of them were from trade organizations. It was rough. There also is a press conference, which is a nice addition. It's something that I think, I don't know necessarily how much Half Wheel necessarily cares about the necessity of having a press conference at the trade show, but it does seem like if the industry is all going to try to gather in one place, or at least most of it, then you should probably have a press conference. It'll be curious to see if there's anything to announce, but I don't know that yet. Maybe we'll find out beforehand. With that said, we've somehow decided to run long here, so we're going to get to the Q&A stuff. What is the first question, Brooks?
Let's try that one.
Do we know the overall financial pullout that these companies represent? We do not. I got some guesses in January of last year. If you just sort of do the math about the booth space that they take at the price that they're allegedly paying, and then you sort of do the math backwards about some of the sponsorships. I don't know if it necessarily leads to a direct. I think it's less than $1 million in direct contributions, but I would feel confident that it's somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million.
Nice,
at least from what I was told. But I've not seen the PCA's detailed finances, so I can't. That's a guess.
How about that one?
Can you read it? Because
yes.
Yeah.
With what happens this year with the PCA, do you think more or less would be present the following year? I'm assuming they're talking about people/manufacturers.
I think that if the really tough part with all of this is someone that's been arguing that this trade show sort of needs to be blown up and reimagined. The PCA has a multi-year contract with the Venetian, from what I understand, about taking a certain amount of trade show floor space. It seems like it's way too much. I don't know if the PCA would be willing to sort of make a radical change. I mean, they tried CigarCon, or they announced CigarCon, and that the Consumer Day, and that did not go over well for a number of reasons. I'm not confident that they're going to be willing to make that change until this contract is up. If that is the case, then yeah, I don't think that there will be as many people here next year as there are this year. I've heard some evidence or some numbers from cigar companies that have surveyed their retailers that indicate that retail attendance might actually be a lot stronger than what most people are thinking. And these are people that would normally be pretty skeptical about it. Obviously, we'll wait to see in Vegas. It's really easy to say, hey, I'll be there, and then not show up. But yeah, I mean, look, if the trade show looks anything like what it did in 2019, which I think you and I would feel like it probably was in a better place in 2019 than what it seems to be in now, without knowing exactly what they're getting into, it's on the decline. You know, we were doing a test run of this yesterday, and the example I came up with is the ship might be pointed back in the right direction or heading in the right direction, but the ship also moved quite a bit of distance away from where it needed to go. It went backwards a lot. And so whether or not the ship is pointed in the right direction or pointed sideways or pointed backwards is up for debate, but there's no question that the ship went the wrong way for the last 2 years, and I think it's been really going the wrong way for a while now.
All right. Do you expect the PCA to do anywhere near as well as it did in 2019, with lots of manufacturers not going and TPE kicking off so close?
No. Do you?
No.
Okay. Look at that. All right. So if we read your contest, or if we read your question, Mitch Smith, I believe, has won many questions or many contests from Half Wheel over the years. But if your question appeared on screen, like a second ago, not if your question appeared in the comment sections, but if you were one of those three people whose questions we read, so it was what, Mitch, Chad, and who was the first one from?
Jennifer Sims. Great name.
Send an email to contest@halfwheel.com. You have until tomorrow at noon Central Time, so a little bit less than 24 hours to claim your prize. Prizes will ship in July. We will be back here. Well, I will be back here. Patrick will be tuning in from Phoenix next week to do the 10 companies we missed the most. So we're going to talk a lot more about Romacraft, Altadas, Davidoff, Drew Estate General, and some other ones. I think that one actually might be like sort of the most interesting show. There's a lot of sort of hypotheticals to be had there. There's things like, to give you a preview, like what would Romacraft's party, which was supposed to be their 10th anniversary party, what would that have looked like would they have done it in Austin, or if they were going, would they just choose to do it in Vegas? And so we're going to talk about things like that, and that applies to, certainly to Davidoff and Drew Estate and some other companies, as well as, how is, we saw a picture of it earlier. There are Drew Estate ads all over the trade show, much like there's going to be Drew Estate ads all over our trade show coverage. That's going to feel different without them there. And so Patrick and I are going to go sort of into the weeds about that. Brooks and I don't know what we're doing for the next show. If anyone's got any suggestions, leave a comment.
That's literally a mystery show at this point.
I don't, who knows? And then, but we will know what we're doing for the last one. Brooks and I are going to pick, hopefully 10. We may have to pick 5 each of our favorite products that we're looking forward to debuting at the show. So if you're a cigar manufacturer, try to get those announcements to happen. Thank you guys for tuning in. This one went a little long, and we need to figure out how to get more people to tune in these things. But once again, we will be back here next week. And thank you to Drew Estate for not only the prizes, but for also sponsoring our coverage of the 2021 PCA convention and trade show. So until next week.